Hey, welcome to the Music and Widescreen Video Podcast. I have two members from Ostura here with me, Elia, Monsef, and Danny. One more time,
Boomaroon.
Boumaroun. It's not that tough, just a matter of my memory. I'm too old. Guys, thanks for joining me. What a wonderful album you guys came out with, The Room. I actually haven't done a video podcast in a while, but this album was so good that you motivated me to pull out all my recording equipment here and get this thing going. So congratulations. I know it's been 6 years in the making. Um, Tell me a little bit about, you've got 14,000 likes, yet you decided to kind of break it down and rediscover this band. Do you want to talk a little bit about that at all?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the band started in back in 2009,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like uh, ambitious, but with constraints because of all the difficulties in the country for this kind of music.
Right.
So the band released the first album. We tried to do it as big as we possibly could at the time, with multiple singers, orchestral arrangements, good production.
Right.
And then we put the album out there to our best knowing. We didn't fish for labels, we didn't do any of that sort.
It's on Bandcamp, so it is more of an indie project, and I think more of a learning experience for us. That like a stepping stone that we learned from. Because I honestly don't think that we could have pulled off this second one if we didn't have the experience and knowledge that we learned from the first one.
Right.
Most let's say 10,000 of those you mentioned
Yeah.
are in the pages because of what we did in the previous album. And at the time, Facebook was easier to get to reach people.
Okay.
And all that. I mean, now it's much more difficult, even though we have like good interaction and all that. But they've made it much more difficult for bands like us to reach our full audience.
Right. Right.
Um,
So I guess
so yeah, we have.
I have one follow-up question. So what do those 10,000 people think of the change? Have you been able to gauge if they're it was kind of off-putting or they're excited or what? I haven't heard the first album, so I don't even know what they expected with the second album.
We were expecting, so it's the first one is it's a lot more power metal.
Okay.
So we're expecting some complaints from people we had a big fan base in Brazil.
Right.
Uh, so we received none. So I don't know, maybe they just didn't hear it, or
It's either that or they just found that this is good enough
this
for
is
them.
fine for them. Yeah, we have some people did mention in their some magazines that reviewed the first one, reviewed the second, and said that it was a positive change. They liked the new sound. They felt like it did sound like it's the same people behind it, more or less. So we didn't get in trouble there, thankfully.
Right. Right. Well, that's great that you weren't off-putting to your original fans from the first album, and you we have this show is called Music and Widescreen. You describe yourself as cinematic. What was the word that you used? Do you think cinematic rock
Cinematic
yeah,
prog.
cinematic prog. I mean, so it's perfect pairing. So of course I'm gonna have my default setting is like to like you guys, but have you seen? I just can't imagine that you were able to. You have a choir and an orchestra and guest stars. How did this all come together? I mean, how were you able to get guys from? Is it Tohinder? I don't even know how to pronounce it. And Ariane in this album.
The thing is that this project started like 1 year after we recorded and released the previous album.
Okay.
And the writing process took a while
A while.
because of the cinematic
Yeah.
approach that we took and the whole reimagining of the sound. But as we were going, as we were writing, before it got really intense and compact, I had to work on other projects as well, and that's when I got the the experience and the approach to and the contacts to talk to these musicians. So in my other band, I played with drummers like Gavin Harrison. We played with Marco, and we played with Kevin Moore, Russell Allen, the X, and one of the projects was with Arjen himself.
Okay.
So the project is with Amadeus Awad, and so with all that, let's call it baggage, it was relatively kind of easier for us to approach these musicians that worked for this project with confidence. You know, like, hey, this is what we do. This is the level of production that we're going for. These are the songs. So and we want to work with you.
Right. Cool.
And so they listen to the music. If they like it and they find that they can have an input on it, then it's a deal.
Right.
We're working together.
Cool. Well, I'm a big Arion fan. We flew twice from Chicago to see the last 2 shows that he did. So, did you happen to see either of those shows at the?
Yeah, I was in Tilburg on the.
You were in Tilburg.
I think on the 17th.
Okay. Yeah, we were there for the last show. We flew in on Saturday, so we got there for Sunday's show in Tilburg. So, speaking of live shows, how was your live show? What did it include? Did it have the orchestra? And you had one live show, correct?
Yes, we had one live show. I think it was right after we released the first album. It was a lot of work to prep for it, but feedback was very good. People really felt like the sound was similar to a studio recording.
Right.
So we were very happy with that. And there was no live orchestra, no, but it was. There was no live orchestra on the album, actually.
Okay.
But basically, yeah, we haven't done one since then.
Okay.
We basically just wanted to focus all our energy on recreating the sound. It's a lot of work.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, I can imagine, because when I think of this thing, I'm like, how did they recreate any of this live? It just seems like a huge work. Go ahead.
We can. It's not that difficult.
Okay.
I mean, laptop with enough keyboards and enough singers. You can.
I mean, the most difficult thing about this kind of thing is getting the people involved to come out and play with us.
Right.
Because when you're working with that caliber of musicians, these people have busy schedules. They have commitments with other bands. They're either promoting or teaching or performing, or releasing an album, and they have to market it. So, it's very difficult to get like everyone on one stage, and I can't even start to think about getting these people on a tour bus.
Right. That would be crazy.
It's already very difficult for Ostura itself. So, getting all these people with us.
It is possible. I think if there's a big enough fan base, we'll definitely make it happen no matter what.
Okay.
We can.
Yeah, because I got to think that at some point you're going to get festivals at least reaching out to you based on this album.
Yeah.
So, what was I going to say? Because, just the big sound. Deathless is a song that, of course, you released as a video, right? And he's got that huge orchestral sound towards the end of it. It just like, it's one of the highlights of the album. The album's full of highlights, okay, but that's one of my favorite portions. And that's something you feel like you can recreate live. That's amazing to me. Yeah, just a lot of keyboards. Go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of the sound. So whenever there's an orchestra, a lot of times there's synths behind it, backing it up. So at the beginning of Deathless, there's this big trailer sound that's like the big intro. That is a lot of synths and a lot of brass together.
Right.
So it's that mix that makes the sound.
Because when we were doing those sounds and we were thinking about the orchestra, we wanted to because when you get an orchestra, even though it's a philharmonic, it would sound like everyone who has an orchestra could sound
like an orchestra.
The same.
Right.
So we wanted to do something that's like unique to us. We wanted to what if we change the sound of the orchestra a bit in some pieces and some places here and there, And for example, for this intro for Deathless, we were we had the sound in our head first, and then we were searching for the tools to recreate it.
Right.
So that's what happens when you have like um, a very talented film score composer working with you.
Oh
These
yeah.
tend to become of no problem whatsoever.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, everything, even when there's just the violin in, like, I think the beginning of Escape, I can't quite remember where that is. In
Yeah.
Escape. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. And when I was listening to this album, I'm thinking, how are they going to have this big and bombastic the whole time? How are they going to end it? And of course, it ends with not a bombastic song, very demure, soft song, and I think it's just a little kind of a 2-minute instrumental towards the end, which I thought was a great idea, because how do you compete with some of the bombastic things from earlier in the album? And I got to ask, what was where did you come up with the heavy breathing for the opening of the album? It works wonderfully.
So actually, where to start? So the process that we used to write, and we will again, is what makes it sound. Why are we calling it cinematic? Is not only the sounds that we use, but also the process, which is basically we write a story, and we have scenes and storyboard kind of for every track. So it's like we write the story of a movie, and then we score the movie. So the album is actually kind of like a soundtrack for a movie that hasn't been filmed yet.
Right.
So the story for that part was
the opening scene was...
Yeah, the opening scene was the girl would be immediately fleeing.
Right. Right.
Conflict. There was a conflict where something happened, and then the girl has to run and for shelter. And that's all the given I had to share with Danny.
At that point, I think you were at work or something, and I was at the studio. It was a smaller studio, not this one. And so Elia tells me, I think the album should start with the girl running from her own insecurities. There's no one actually behind her, but she's running like crazy, as if there is. So I sent him, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 suggestions, like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And he was like, it's fine. I don't know. It's not quite there. And then it was like midnight or something. I was so frustrated. I got outside the studio and I started sprinting alone in the street. And so I heard myself breathing, and I said, that's the tempo that I'm going to use, and maybe you could start with that tempo.
Right.
I got to the studio, and I was like, okay, so it's this tempo. And then I was like, why don't I just record the breathing as it is?
So actually, the search for the tempo, the right tempo for someone running, turned out to be the actual tempo click we used for the track, and we kept it. It gives you the real feel of urgency that the music.
And then, of course, Yumna, the female singer, she's also a main member of the band. When she went in to record, so we would record samples and then give it to the singer, and then they would record it later. So when Yumna came to record it, I can't tell you how difficult it is to record following tempo in perfect,
right,
and in a recording room, and then she almost fainted, like, for about a minute. She was like, she came out, she was like, it's really difficult. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's funny because when I played the song last time, I did the breathing and tried to do it in the right tempo so that it could overlay my breathing with the real breathing, and I happened to catch it about right. But I could definitely imagine that the tempo is actually slower than you remember it. When you think about what the tempo is, it seems like much more panicky, but actually it's a lot slower than your memory lets you think it is. So I did notice that about that.
Cool.
But I think it's a great, unusual, new thing I never heard before. And I did want to get into the story a little bit, but not in too much detail, because I know it's more allegorical than concrete what's going on. But it seems they have something to do with maybe, when I look at the album cover, I think about security, right? There's this door, maybe in a comfortable place for you, and then the big city in the background with the clouds kind of masking it, and about kind of agoraphobic type of visual I'm seeing from the album cover and from the I should get this a little closer to my mouth here, and from the lyrics. And let's at least talk about the three main characters a little bit, and about any more detail that you want to give or don't want to give would be good.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the story is both literal and kind of
Open to interpretation.
open to interpretation, but there is a clear storyline happening from A to Z. But I mean, in between there are these details and subtleties and layers where the same words or sequence of words can also mean something else, something that you can connect with from your own experience.
Right. Okay.
It's very difficult to combine, by the way. The two words, and having to split all those into three different singers or three different characters.
Right.
So in brief, the story happens as a girl is actually entering a room, which is her hideout place. And the girl has two visions of herself. One who's more of the dirt, the animal side of her, and the other,
which is him basically,
which is the character that I sing, and the other character is the utopic version of her, like the better version of her, the person she wants to be.
Right. Gotcha.
And both the three of them have different. It's a power struggle between the three, but the interesting thing is that it all happens in an imaginary world in her head, where she gets to create a universe of her own, and those characters manifest into actual beings, all three of them. And it's a conflict on actually who creates in this world, like who's the creator, who's the created.
Each character is struggling for power also, because each one believes that they should be, their way is the right way. So it is, I think at some point you can interpret it as the girl being the self, and then his character, the animal, and then the other character, Mike, is super ego. So we really wanted to go for a kind of a psychological drama, something that is a bit timeless, so that we wouldn't run into a problem, I don't know, like 20 years from now, it would still apply as a story. So we avoided, I don't know, dragons or, things that are specific to our era or a certain era. It's more of a story about a human being.
Yeah, it's a human. It's the most important thing. It's like a magazine in Beirut wrote about an analysis about it, which was really spot on, because it really, the whole story is almost like an anxiety attack that's luring you into becoming solitary and becoming in a shell, in your own shell.
Right.
And versus the part of you who wants to actually deal with this problem. So that's how this flow of emotions, and it's your struggle with this kind of thing, this psychological struggle. That's basically in brief, without going into details and into yeah.
And that's brief.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think that it certainly gets across. And it's interesting you mentioned about lyrics being interpreted in different ways. And I really happen to like that. You may or may not have heard. There's two songs that do that extremely well, I think. And they're not necessarily prog, but there's a song by Genesis called "Driving the Last Spike," actually. And the lyric the same lyric every time has a different meaning. It says, can you see me? Can you feel? Can you hear me? Something like that. And it's basically talking about the railroad people doing the railroad construction. And the first time through, it means, hey, we're struggling out here. We're it's really a tough life. And then the last time, it's actually there's been a cave-in, and they're looking for help. But the same lyric applies, and so I think that's always a great usage in prog rock,
Exactly, because we want people to be able to listen to the lyrics as well, and we paid so much attention on the phonetics of the words, like
Right.
for it to just roll out of your mouth,
Mm.
like not destroying the melody because we want to cram in some extra words because we want to be smart or clever,
We
Right.
fought a lot about it.
Yeah, like there's that struggle in writing. Like you have to make sense and you have to sound good and you have to not be over
Wordy.
complicated and wordy,
Right. If anything,
Um,
I think maybe you had less words because in Deathless, I was expecting something. I remember one thing to be like 4 or 5 syllables, and it just ended up being a pause and 2 syllables. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So I
We-
think. Go ahead.
It's because we normally write the melodies.
Mhm.
We compose the melodies before we actually write the lyrics. So we write a story,
Right.
then write the music for it, then
Mhm.
write the melody based on the best way for the melody to work, and then comes the hellish part of choosing the right words to fill in the
fit that
syllables and just make sense and tell a good story.
Right. Right.
And a story that is also, as you mentioned, multi-layered. We want people to think about this imaginary world, but we also want them to think about their own,
Right.
and to feel that this song could talk about them. There's
Right.
Morning Light, a song that has the chorus like they dream with me away from pain, and the actual storyline is that the girl is mourning someone's literal death.
Right.
But this song also means expanding your imagination and controlling your own dreams and that as well. So yeah, we
Right.
try to do that.
Right.
I hope it worked.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I think it does, and I think that the great thing about having lyrics that are you've taken time with is it's usually the last thing that listeners actually take in
True.
is the lyrics.
Mm.
So once you've listened to it a few times, and then you try and look at the booklet that comes with the album, or you find the lyrics from the lyric video or whatever, it becomes new again. By taking on the meanings, and I spent today looking at all the lyrics, and I just thought, wow, this is amazing. And I didn't, some things that I knew about the album, I knew more after listening to the lyrics, and I thought this is wonderful. It really is. So, and it reminds me a lot, as a matter of fact, because I met a few people in Tilburg and I got their email addresses and I emailed every one of them and I said, oh yeah, if you like Ariane, you should check out this album, especially if you liked Human Equation. I thought it was the most because it does tell a story. It has even character names that are more about what they are, not just like, it's not like just James. It's more like a name of the fear or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So I thought that was very, it's definitely for Ariane fans, this album. I'm so glad that Ariane was on this to help with the kind of cross promotion.
So-
I'm sure. What did he think when you sent him the song that he's on? Which song is he on? I don't remember off the top of my head. And what did he think of it?
Track 9. That track was. It is the Arion song, so that's the most Arion inspired track for us, and it was
Okay.
kind of an homage to him, and we really wanted him. Like, we wrote that song saying, let's hope that Arion will play a solo on it,
Uh-huh.
and that would be perfect.
Right.
It was not an easy task because he doesn't really play a lot of sessions,
Right.
barely. So he must have really liked it because he said, "Oh, this is great. I already know what I can do for this."
Oh, wonderful.
I remember getting the news. I was hiking somewhere, and then Elia just sends me this email. He's like, "Arion is in," and I'm like, crazy.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised. It's funny because for me, I'm not a musician, so I just take in things as a fan, And to me, Beyond the World actually sounded like an Ariane song to me. And I think it might just be because of, Utopia ends with a lyric, let's see, your time has come, and then it just kind of drops off. It kind of reminds me of what he does when he switches singers a lot. It's just kind of like this kind of big staccato portion, and then kind of a lull, and then a whole nother gender comes in right after that. And so I definitely heard Ariane references all throughout the album. Is that Is that
we
true?
are really big fans of Aryan,
Okay.
of Aryan's projects actually, not only Arion, you know.
Yeah.
And we've been listening to him maybe since 2010 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
The back and forth between singers and gender thing, it's also, I mean, highly influenced by a lot of musical theater.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
mean, so because I was in West Virginia, I did a master's in composition there, and it's a very musical theater-y school.
Gotcha.
And I remember loving that aspect of like interchanging different singers and stuff. And Elia agreed a lot.
yes,
That's definitely something that we should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
because for example, I'm a huge fan of, for example, the big musical theater pieces like The Phantom of the Opera and Les Miserables, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And also those were very much, we can say that they are as big of an influence as any other rock band on this album, especially when it comes to dialogue and the lyrics. You know, the lyrics for those songs are really
Roll off the tongue.
amazing in meaning and in phonetics, you know.
Right.
So that was also a good reference for us to know. Like, I mean, we want it to flow. We don't want it. We don't want singers to just like sing on top of each other and be, you know, whatever. So we were trying to make it as theatrical as possible without making it also musical theater in genre, because that's a very niche of the crowd, you know. Also,
Right.
you can't expect the metal musicians to appreciate that too much.
And is there? This is just a kind of a question for me. Having a little bit of a poetry background, is there meter? Is there syllables? There's like iambic pentameter. Do you guys ever try and get stresses on certain measures or at certain notes in the measure, or is that not really a thing?
It's well, like Elia said before, the vocal melody comes first.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we would tweak the melody if the sentence feels a bit off, like the structure of the sentence feels weird, or the syllables aren't properly symmetrical.
Yes,
we can change some things.
But it's
sometimes.
musical first, because
Right.
the if you want to put in the terms of priority, you know, the melody, the music has to come first, because you also actually proved this right when you said that the last thing that you get to is the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And because just taking the music, you take the melody, you just hum something on without actually knowing the words, and then it grows on you to a level that you want to find out about the lyrics. So actually we took that into consideration while writing them, because the melody comes, like stressing this syllable it serves the melody. So also when we're like wording the syllables, we have to choose a word that has the value,
stress in the middle.
Right.
It has to portray that value. You can't have like a random word that doesn't push the meaning further. So it's not coming from a poetry background, more like from the necessity that we wanted to really serve the melody, and we wanted to really serve the meaning.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, that's that's kind of what I expected to hear. I just never really tried. I never asked that question. I never really even thought about it, except for in certain situations such as this album into the thing. I just noticed my notes here. What is the music scene like in Beirut? And is you kind of mentioned earlier that that it was kind of odd thing, and like any country is like that. I mean, you don't get airplay with this music anywhere in the world. So I mean, how is it there? Is it do you feel from your perspective it's worse or better there to be coming out with something like this?
Actually, there's the music scene in Lebanon is like, other than the Oriental local music scene, which is Arabic speaking and almost entirely different in everything. There is a very solid let's call it Western music, or like in Europe. You have the local musicians and you have the international musicians, but it's also, as in Europe and as in the US, it's pop based. So
folk, a lot of indie folk too.
But there's a movement in Beirut. There's a lot of jazz musicians in Beirut, maybe one of the best in the world. Also, there are a lot of indie bands coming out of Beirut.
Not too much prog. Maybe there's a couple other bands. I think
Yeah.
Amadeus is one. Turbulence.
Yeah, Turbulence, yeah.
So yeah, our focus was mainly on countries from abroad, the U.S., Netherlands. But we did. I mean, we got a lot of comments from people in Lebanon saying, "Well, I don't usually listen to metal, but I loved this one." So I don't know if it was just them supporting local talent, or maybe we kind of broke through to them somehow.
Right.
A lot of people really enjoyed.
But there's a decent rock scene in Beirut. Like people listen to rock music in Beirut. Actually, people listen to old rock and music from the 80s and also as well, like even in the young generation.
Yeah.
You know, like bands like Whitesnake and Deep Purple and
A lot of
Zeppelin, you know, Metallica.
Right.
So yeah, it's not as good as in for example in the UK prog scene
Right.
or the American rock scene, but I mean it's pretty decent for here.
It's big to have a good amount of musicians that were able to record with us. So
Mhm.
that was something that we were able to find. So, and it's easier to find the talented. So it wasn't that difficult to find probably the best guitar players in Lebanon, like Adnan Brahim, rhythm guitars. Guys, just so it wasn't easy. So it's because the scene is so small, then it's easy to find where the talent is.
Right.
Exactly. We have talents that could really be of the same caliber as the people we listen to, you know? We
Right.
have good guitar players in Lebanon. We have good drummers. We have good bass players. We have good keyboard players. So, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
hopefully you'd hear more of the country and more of Lebanon and more of us.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting because I thought that that there'd be a lot of stuff actually coming out from around the world, and I'm starting to hear more of it here and there, especially from India and other areas abroad. 12-hour difference from here, from us in the States here. So that's always, I don't know. It's always good to hear that it's coming out there, and I think why people I also heard from somebody that doesn't typically rate kind of metal albums 5 stars. He said, "Well, this one I have to," but I think it's metal secondarily. I think it's more cinematic and bombastic, and metal is kind of just metal is a byproduct of the emotion from the music and not the primary focus of what you wanted to get across to the listener.
It's the best way to put it, actually.
Exactly. A lot of people have asked us, so why metal? Like, I mean, so I write music for films. This is my day-to-day job. I write for ads and documentaries and stuff. So people
Right.
know that I write music. So why do you have a metal band? Like, why not another type? And my answer is always, in metal, we can do absolutely anything we want. There's no limitations, and we have an idea and we want to express it. And so in the Surge, there's a oud playing, and then there's a choir, and then there's a dubstep section at the end, and nobody says, "Oh, you can't do that." You know, that's not appropriate.
Right.
Because it's the best playground, basically. So,
Also
Gotcha.
with the surge of emotions and you have like real intensity. I mean, nothing can beat a groove, a drum groove.
yeah.
Nothing can beat a good chug of guitar. You know, like if
Right.
you need, like if you're having frustration and anger and anxiety,
Not that we went through that at all.
if you have those emotions building up inside you, I mean, a triangle is not the best instrument to go for.
Yeah. Right. Well, cool. And so there are no other shows scheduled. What do we have anything to plug at this point besides the album?
We doing physicals. We can fairly say that.
Announce it. Oh, I think in a few days we
Okay.
plan on announcing that physical CDs will be available.
Okay.
In worldwide distribution. I think in about a couple weeks, maybe 3 tops, with a nice 24-page booklet,
Right.
with all the artwork and the lyrics and the credits and everything. So we're prepping for that.
Okay. And I will say, because I have the digital copy of all of the what's going to be printed, that for people watching this video, this is definitely something you want to get the physical copy of, because not only the artwork on the cover, which you can kind of see here in the video, is done with a lot of love, but I mean, every page, all the lyrics are there. You know, and it's at least a 7-piece ensemble. I think the band is, right. Is it 7 of you in there?
5 of us.
5.
Is
it 5? Okay.
5 is the core band.
Okay.
But also, for example, if we are to play shows, we definitely be more.
More than 5.
There will be more than 5 people, because one extra singer for the bassist, and yeah, so it's the bassist and one extra singer.
Right.
That's the core.
And because the lyrics are so interesting and important, you know, they have the lyrics, I think is a great thing. Certainly, I wouldn't dissuade anybody from if they want just do digital these days to do digital, but really there's a lot that went into the physical in it, and it makes me it's one of those albums that you can look at the artwork while listening to the album, and certainly take in, you know, you let your imagination flow afterwards. So we'll be looking forward to the physical, that's for sure. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was saying that the artwork is actually one extra layer of the lyrics of the concept of.
We couldn't shoot a movie, so we might as well. Basically, we found an amazingly talented artist. His name is Charles Assaf. You can check out his stuff on Facebook on the page, I think.
Yeah.
We were blown away, like that. We live next to a guy that's so talented, and we really took advantage of him. Basically, each track needs its own artwork,
right?
And so,
right.
Yeah.
That's a very long process, but it paid off.
Yeah. Well, it's been 5-6 years between albums, and so I'm sure it was a long process for a lot of people. So I'm glad it came out.
Yeah. The album we finished writing in 2015.
Okay.
Actually, even earlier, we finished recording maybe in 2015. But I mean, it was the getting the album out there took a whole year.
Right.
And also before that, we were like
looking for a mixing engineer.
We were looking for a mixing engineer who was
who can handle the
track. Exactly. And also we had a lineup change in the beginning of we were writing for certain people or with certain people, or for them, let's say, and then these people aren't in the picture anymore. So we have to restructure the way we write, fit someone else, someone else's voice or someone else's playing capabilities. So yeah, that also was a major setback. Delayed. I mean, the writing wise and recording, it's basically 2 full years out of the 5 years. A bit more, yeah.
So will your fans have to wait another at least 3 years then for the next album?
Well, I mean, can we say that we're starting to brainstorm ideas for the story. So like we said before, the story comes first. We have some music ideas. The direction is definitely similar. I want to say a little bit more intense, but I don't think anyone can handle that. I mean, first of all, we wouldn't be able to handle something more intense. But to answer your question, I think definitely we'll have one out sooner.
Okay.
Than 6 years.
Yeah,
for sure.
I don't want to get caught up. I mean, we're promoting this album. I don't really want to kind of say, hey, what have you done for me lately? It's been a month. But I just thought it was worth asking anyway. Anyhow, well, guys, I'm going to end it here. Thank you for your time. And I really, I've said it enough. It's a great album. We hope that, personally, what I'd like to see is a lot more prog likes, people that I know liking your Facebook page. And is that the best thing? You don't have a website, or do you? Do you have a? The
website actually we are also redesigning the website. So that would be announced as well with either with or just shortly after the physical release thing.
Okay, all right. So right now, if you're watching this video, in April of 2018. Just check the Facebook page, and otherwise we'll put a link in the show notes later on to the actual site when it's
Sure.
when it's launched. And
Great, yeah.
that's it. So guys, thanks again for being
Thanks
with
so
us.
much for
And
having us.
Thanks.
sure,
Support, man. It really means a lot. Just the amount of support that we got, especially from the U.S., has been like. This is why I remember when you did the radio show that you had us featured.
yeah,
Podcast.
And
Impulse,
Elia, this is why we made this album. Like, it's because of people like this appreciating it and loving it. That's our main reason, why we did it, and why we were planning on doing another one. It's just such a good feeling
right.
to have much support from fans like you. And
Yeah. Well, just be prepared for me not to like your second album or your third album not as much as this album, because you only got one way to go. So that's the problem with this album. So when I go about the next album, no, it's
We'll talk 6 years.
all right, guys. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon. We'll keep you posted on what's going on here. All right.
all right.
All right.
Have a good one.
Thanks. All right, I'm ending it, but we can talk a little bit here. So, guys, thanks a lot. That won't need much post production. It's a little bit choppy because we're so far away. But,
Okay.
Oh, you know what? One more question I want to ask you guys. Let me just try one more, and maybe I'll insert it in.